Once again, thank you very much for sharing your insights. I think also was it Vestas? Vattenfall, sorry, but Vattenfall touched the topic and the similarity on the presentation in relation to risk. And I think that one was, I also captured that one. I think risk ownership and visibility. Thinking, who's actually responsible for that throughout the supply chain? Is it the utilities? Is it the OEMs or the suppliers or the tier 5 supplier? Or is it somewhere where it's everybody's responsibility and then it becomes nobody's responsibility? Or anybody share reflections?
At least it has to be very clear in contracts and agreements. Also, if it's a joint venture, or it just has to be documented very clear.
Yeah. Throughout the different projects, then maybe, or
yeah.
I think at the end risks need to be shared, and that's then how to share that. It's one thing putting that right into the contract and the paperwork, but on the other thing is on the other hand making the flow transparent, having the trust on all sides to prepare an environment to have that transparency, and then I think everybody has a share of taking that risk, but everybody needs to know where is what risk exposure, where is it coming from, what is the origin, and what can I do, what can my organization do to mitigate that.
Yeah, but
okay.
No, what I think is also is that what you often tend to see is that risk is always late identified, and that means that often it tends to be something that you state in the lessons learned in the end of a project. And that means that actually when you start a project, you should perhaps start with saying, what is the lessons learned from the last projects or from the other projects or across the stakeholders? But I see many times just in the archive, you say you have done it, it's a done task, instead of using that up front in the next one. That's the, what I think is actually missing a lot right now is that we across share the risk, but also face what did we actually lose last time by not addressing it.
So like in for instance the kickoff meeting is to challenge each other in a good construction manner, right? But be open about that. There's a new opportunity for collaboration, and then what's our past experience, right? Not to repeat it. Yeah, good. All right. Anybody else has a question for the? We have a mic over here, or I need to bring the mic. Sorry.
Thank you very much. It's actually for you, Lauren. You talked about maturity assessment. So in your opinion, when you look into maturity assessments, should you focus on the maturity of the process being used or the product being designed, or do you see it as a combination?
It's a very, very valid question, and I would recommend you to do both. And what is striking me is we are very good at talking about something we can see, but when we can't see it, then it becomes another conversation. And of course, when you go to process, most of the time you can't see the process, and then people struggle in there, which is a bit the same in software. What is interesting is that when you go to process capability assessment in an organization, most of the organization, they don't know exactly what to talk about, because most of the time they even do not have a very clear process description. Now, when you go to the learning, you discover that it takes a bit of time for people to formalize the process. Now, when you contract with any contractor, if you bring the quality at the end, at the product, such as factory acceptance, it means that all the process failures have been embedded into the product. And then you go to root cause analysis, fishbowl, and then you discover it's a process issue. Then if you engage with the supplier to work on the process up front, then to left shift the quality into process quality control, then you may have different answer. what is for me very, very optimistic is that if you bring this, it's a learning tool also for the employee. And then Lisbeth said this, it becomes the way you do your work, and you support the people to do that. This is where AI may help a lot if we are capable to bring AI as an enabler to people to grow, not as a challenger of your work, but as something that will help you to better define your process and the quality of your process and how you are going to control the process and maybe to improve process and to shorten the loop of learning. So this is why this morning I was insisting on both and more and more on processes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question in the corner.
Yeah, I want to build on that with the risk and also on what Vattenfall said earlier to you, Laurent. What is the enabler for being able to get to that point? And I know technology, AI is a part of your question, but probably there's other enablers. What I'm thinking of is that we have this dispute cost and we have the liability in the contract. So is there any barriers from a very high point of view we need to remove to enable ourselves to allow this new culture to grow of sharing risks?
Wow, that you enter into a very big conversation, and there is no CEO in the room. I don't think so, but that's a big conversation between CEOs. How you want to share the risk in the value chain, and do we have a common agenda about this? If the challenge we have, the challenge is decarbonation as an example, let's focus on the challenge. Let's not focus on creating risk because of the way we contractualize this. There are some countries that have shifted their contract into a more what they call alliance type contract, where they are acknowledging that they have risk in what they want to do, and they are agreeing to share the risk upfront. And then they put in place a new contracting model to really tackle the risk. Now, if your contracting model does not allow that, then you need to be prepared for the consequence of your decision. And I can see, in particular in your industry, that there is a disalignment. Now, if you continue like this, the risk you have is you are going to perpetuate, not because of the technical challenge or the operational challenge, but because of the way you work in this value chain. Now, when I was running the business, the cost of my supplier was nothing compared to my risk. So when I was dealing with my procurement organization, the guy says, this is the cheapest cost. And I said, how much of risk does it come with? And then when you compare risk and cost is nothing. The biggest element is risk. Now, one of the main challenge you have in an organization is your procurement department.
Hopefully they're not here today, right? That was actually a little bit maybe a fun clue, sharing. Back in the days when we were just getting started on this APQP4Wind journey, without mentioning names, we invited 2 OEMs. And then one of them told about all of this, that we wanted to do this and quality and all of this here. And then a fairly small sub-supplier raised up and said, so have you aligned this with your purchase department? Because, we don't see it. And then he had to call for a timeout and then discuss with the team. We're working on it, right? So we are implementing it. So I think that's somehow true, right? But maybe that should be part of the challenging them. And then maybe the next reflection is, I think that was at Vestas Place when we had the kickoff back in 2014 or something like that. That was some suppliers were sitting a little bit like this about the concept and stuff like this, and then, so who's going to pay for it? And I think, I can't recall, one of you was saying this about making sure it embedded in your management system, so it's not on top, right? But it's what you do. And I think then with your alignment on the terminology and stuff like this, I think maybe that's the single biggest impact that we have had, that now we talk the same language. Because if I don't understand what you tell me to, and you keep pushing me, then ultimately I will give you what you ask for, not knowing that I already had something that I could just tweak, right? All right. Any more questions? Yes. Here we go again. Oh, you have one there.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Balo from Nordex, and many of the colleagues know me as well. And we have talked about a lot about the supply chain and APQP and the integration risk and transparency. I build on the Vattenfall statement again. Yeah, thanks for starting up. One thing about the transparency part. Yeah. So when it comes to the transparency part, how do you feel, guys, with the failures what we are encountering in the service? For example, in the field, we have a lot of, as you said, Lisbeth, very clear, a lot of falling blades, a lot of tonality topics, a lot of vibrations, and a lot of topics. Yeah? And it's not something just happened yesterday. It happened for years and years and years, and we are missing the feedback loop into our DFMEAs and specification. But we are talking about the tier 1 level, how much it got penetrated into the sub-tiers, and how we are protecting ourselves based on the risk transparency from the sub-suppliers, sub-chain, sub-tiers towards our field failures to protect us from quality and safety risk. It's a big question, sorry about that, but just to understand how APQP4Wind Forum and what's going to be the future steps we are going to address.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody dare to take the challenge?
Well, I think compared to 5 years, 10 years back, the transparency and the openness is already far higher than it was before. Talking from a supplier that is speaking with OEMs about failures or risk or whatever. I think we have already done a big job and passed a lot of miles on the road. But we are not at the end yet. I think it's always, whenever it comes to failures or costs, of course, everybody's cautious. What should I do? What should I say? I don't know whether it is about standards, it's about trust, about the right people talk to each other, and having the things done right in the APQP process up front. That should be as well the basis to have a trustful conversation afterwards if things have gone wrong. But coming back to your point, I think we are not yet where we should be in regard to openness, transparency, and trust, but we are far better than it was 5 years back.
So here again, this is a big and simple conversation. When I compare to aerospace, if you have a failure in service, you have to really share it very rapidly with everybody. And I think this is the right mindset, because then you focus on what is important. If you start to be in the value chain where it's highly fragmented and the loop back takes ages, then it means that you are not, as a leader, aligning the complete value chain to what is the purpose of the game. The purpose of the game is to produce electricity at the best cost for the next generation. Now, is it to make a bit of my P&L and then to consider that it's going to be okay? I think it's not enough for humanity. But we need something much bigger. We need to go much faster in how fast we want to improve the reliability in service. And today, the loop is far too long. Far too long. And there is no reason why it is so long. Because we can learn very, very fast. And if we are lazy, we can use AI tool to learn even faster. So I would recommend everybody to say, really jump on it and then to say how we are going to solve this so that it becomes very, very efficient. Because globally, we as humanity, we have no time and we don't have a lot of money. So that will be my encouragement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So if I dare, so it's a little bit like with your children, a little bit on maturity, but be forgiveness. And then I think it's about, I think I think you're right. It takes courage, right, to go in and start, but we don't really have a choice, right? I mean, what's the alternative? We keep repeating mistakes, right? And then if anybody knows, you know that the cycles or the ups and bumps and downs that we have been, that's not good for anybody in the industry, right? So I think we need to take the courage, and then maybe we also need to reflect in our business relationships that if somebody comes with a risk or a shared issue and stuff like this, be open and maybe not say, so what have you decided to do about it? I just learned. You told me to tell you right away, and don't, you know. So I think that's the dynamic we also need to, in a collaborative manner, right, to share. Question?
Hello, I'm Du Changyuan, actually came from the Goldwind. This is the first time to attend the meeting. Now I'm going to ask one question for lesbians. You know, today you make quite impressive presentations about the safety and quality. You know, a lot of the safety accidents caused by the quality defects, such as you mentioned that the fire on the nacelle, even the tower collapse. Now, from the HSE point of view, how can we facilitate the quality from our HSE point of view to enhance the turbine's inherent safety?
Yeah, it's a very good question because, as I mentioned, it goes across. So I think it's very much to build safety into our quality processes. So I mentioned the design process that too often we come in too late from the safety side, but it's also in the assurance activities. It's in the sourcing of contractors. Gert is a big part of that. I know we do it together. But I think it's building safety into, instead of having here's the safety processes and here's the quality processes, it has to be built together. It's at least a big part. There's much more to it, but I think in this forum, I think that will be my answer.
Yeah, thank you. Question here.
Thank you. I have a very general question. As you know, in the wind industry, we always, in product development, we follow the agile product development approach. I mean, we never go from design to mass production. We always have a prototype, pre-series, and series. My question is how APQP can help us to shorten this product development time. I mean, going from design, ideally to mass production, or even just shorten this time, like removing one of these parts, like prototyping or pre-series, anyway, to shorten this time. That would be a biggest example to use quality to enable their business.
I can start this one because this is a very, very challenging one. And let me give you the example of the automotive. So I don't know if you've seen the evolution in automotive. Now they can design and deliver a car, sorry, not a locomotive, a car, in 21 months. The way they do that is that they are starting from a platform. And the platform is a set of building blocks, hardware and software building blocks. And they know which building blocks needs to be upgraded and what are the other ones that are not changed. And they are very clear also how the building blocks interact with each other. So when they go and prototype, they know exactly where they prototype, on which building block they are focusing on. So it's not reinventing everything. They are very clear. Now the question is to what is the level of granularity on your platform? So, and that's a critical question for engineers. What is the lowest level of granularity where you can say, this is part of my platform? So if you take, for instance, a blade and you say, yeah, what is the building block of a blade? You know, I'm not an engineer, a blade engineer, but I would assume that in the way they are designing a blade, they have building blocks that they are using. and that they are bringing together. And then with this, they can say, now for this type of product, I can guarantee you with my platform and the testing that I have that I can secure in a deterministic way my product development, and I don't need this additional testing. So then you move your conversation from the end product to platform. Then if you go to platform management in engineering, it's a new discipline. And then how you bring quality assurance in platform, it's a very, very different topic. And I would advise you to go back to questioning your engineering about what type of platform they use and how you bring the quality assurance on the platform.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, good day. My name is Jawad Mutawallian. I am quality manager in offshore wind project. I have a question for Jan. You start the panel regarding this global competitiveness. And when you see these nice guidelines and also all of these supplier and also developer sit in the panel, do you see that do we need more ownership in terms for the developer and suppliers? Because when everyone talk about risking, share risking, it means that when I want to share the risk, then I should have more ownership and control, or delegate it to the supplier, because it is somehow for me a conflict.
Thank you for that question. Risk sharing, you have it all the way up. In times where everything is quite complicated, and it seems to be complicated, I like the wording you said. Have to be aware of what are you doing. We are producing electricity as the cheapest possible way. We have had a period where I think most of you, maybe also decision makers, think that could we do on what you would call a market-based approach. That's not the case right now, at least not in offshore wind. I can't find a place in the world where you can do that basically right now on a pure market-based. So therefore now you also discuss risk sharing in relation to get the investments done. So where risks will always be there. It's just a question about who will have it. And there, at least there has been an industry approach that if you are transparent, you can share the risk on a fair, reasonable way. And again, that's the good question. Can you always do that? I doubt that you can do that. And you most probably won't be able to do so. So your question, would that change ownership? I don't necessarily think so. But I think it will call for more transparency, and then it will maybe start in the top, where you decide on the investments. What I think that the biggest change is that when you guys, and for example, we in Denmark built the first offshore plants, it was a project approach. Of course, it still will be a project approach, but now it's a question about how we change our energy system. And the energy system as such, energy policy as such, has always been political influenced and ruled and governed. And that, I think the biggest change is now what we are doing in energy sector, much more will be seen from an energy system perspective and much more less from a technology perspective. So we'll see a lot of new demands. We'll see a lot of new rules also in relation to how to operate and manage an offshore plant in the future. It's not just a question about putting up a number of turbines and a cable to shore and put it into the grid. It's much more detailed. So it's much more complex. The risk will still be there, but I think the risk sharing will start even at a level higher. And maybe that can change the sharing of risk during the supply chain. Because some of the old models, at least we have seen in Europe, they had the big challenge that all the risk was going downwards in the supply chain. And that's why we have been in this situation the industry has been for some years, where nobody basically earned anything, and it was very difficult to get investments done. So maybe that the risk sharing with the political decision level will change some of these things right now. But as you said, Kim, it has gone up and down, and we have done a lot of learnings, and some of them more than once, I think. So that would be my view. I don't think necessarily change ownership.
No, then maybe just adding maybe then some of these ups and downs or failures or risks that actually came into real life have actually stimulated the regulations, right? So, right, there was a question over here.
Thanks. I think that goes to Jan, this one. We have this carbon capture system. In which degree do you see this as being part of the future energy system, or is it just a symptom of doing something about the current energy systems we have?
You're talking about CCS? Yes. How to address this one? I think CCS in some countries is mainly, maybe purely, driven by climate targets. The day you don't have climate targets, it's becoming a totally different ballgame. In Denmark, it is extremely important, because if we don't do it, we won't fulfill our climate target by 2030 and 2035. But what about the rest of the energy system? Of course, we have to survive the globe in the long run. We have to go negative. Will that be CCS based? In some systems, depending on the political regulation, it is the only way, and maybe also the cheapest way, because if, for example, in Denmark, just to give that as a case, if we would cancel our CCS, how then to reduce the CO2 reductions? Because then you have to pay basically twice. You have to invest in something different, and then you remove carbon. I think the future will show if this is a good business case or not. If you see it from a climate perspective, we do it because we simply electrify too slow and too little. So it's needed if we electrify too slow and invest too little in renewable-based electricity, in my view.
Good. I think we have time for another question. If anybody, when do you get the opportunity to have such a talented panel? Ike? Yeah, just.
That's a really good question. The APQP approach, standardization and these things, in my view, is basically born and developed in a regulatory framework where we basically think that we use the same rules across the globe. That's the way they are born. If that in the future is not anymore the case, will these systems then still work? So political agendas change over time. We all know that. I think we are in a period right now where there's something about this superpower competition among the people on the last slide. But for example, seen from a US perspective, in my view, for 10 years or so, even more. It's been a question about working places, production. Does that take place in the US or does it take place out of? So if that's what drives decision making right now, then maybe it will be different type of initiatives needed to do that. So if we look into a more regionalized setup in production, of course the same tools still work, but will it bring down cost? Not necessarily. In Europe, we have told ourselves that renewable produced electricity basically free. It has never been free. Everything has a price, also producing electricity based on renewables. And now Europe has to pay a higher price. That's what comes from the political agenda, that we will be less dependent on other regions in the world. So it will change again, for sure, but in which direction? When I was at the university and these things, we all believed in global free trade, and we put up global-based systems. They don't work anymore. So it's into a new regulatory framework in general. So I think you have as good an answer as I have in what to do. But the setup is different. And the overall macroeconomic power plays are different. And how then to do more standardization and these things. Where is your competitive edge then in such a system?